On today's show, we're looking at an early season Calder watch. We'll talk about Celebrini, Michkov, Stankoven, and a lot more on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hattie Kalakash, QMJHL scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be talking about an early season Calder watch in the NHL. We'll be looking at some marquee NHL prospects who are the front runners, some decent kind of dark horse candidates. And this season, there's a lot of prospects who could make the cut and be finalists for the Calder there. So we'll talk about all of them. First, we'll start with Celebrini and Michkov in the first segment. We'll then talk about Stankoven and Lane Hutson in the second segment. Then we'll talk about a bunch of guys, Cutter Gauthier, Will Smith, Olen Zellweger, Dustin Wolf, and anyone else that comes to mind. Before we get into any of that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. So let's get started right away here with the front runners for the Calder watch. Now, I think with all the hype and all the points that Matvei Michkov has garnered through the preseason, we're off to a great start on his side. But I believe through one game, he doesn't have a point yet, right?
Not just yet. I mean, we're not going to hold that against him. He had some really dynamic offensive moments in that game that he played with Philly against the Vancouver Canucks. He logged 18 and a half minutes of time on ice. He logged 4 shots on goal and had one really nice shot attempt between the legs right at the goal mouth. But yeah, as you mentioned, he was dominant in preseason, constantly creating offense, and he's going to be one of the front runners for this trophy. I don't think he's the favorite. We'll get into the favorite in just a second. I don't think there are many surprises right there, but Michkov is certainly a player that will be playing a big role in driving offense for the Philadelphia Flyers this season. A really exciting year for Philly fans, considering that you have 2 high-profile rookies that were top 13 picks in the lineup this year. Jet Luchenko also cracked that lineup, playing a third-line center role, and there's just a lot to look forward to with the Flyers at the moment. But pertaining to Michkov, what are your expectations for him this season? Like, obviously, he'll be in the mix for the Calder, but what do you think he's actually going to do to push for that award, and how many points do you think he might garner this season?
See, I wouldn't be surprised if Matvei Michkov puts in somewhere in the range of 60 points this year. He's going to have a great opportunity at the top end of the Philadelphia Flyers lineup. You know, he's under the same situation as Jet Luchenko, who's basically on a 9-game trial in the bottom 6 and is going to have to kind of prove himself defensively primarily. We all know what Michkov brings to the game. It's offense, intelligence, off-puck movement, great work 6 feet around the net. That's his core. That's what Michkov does so well. And so far in preseason, he was above a point a game. He was, obviously playing against lesser competition, but he was still playing primarily in the top 6 for Philadelphia. So I don't expect that to change as the season goes on with Michkov, unless he starts kind of dipping in terms of off-puck performance. Because what we've seen from Michkov in the preseason was great forechecking work, some intelligent off-puck movement, a prospect who was consistently engaged on pucks. These are the types of things that John Tortorella values from his prospects, right? So for him to continue to stay in the top 6 for Philly, the points need to come, and especially more importantly, the structural tactical play needs to come and fit within what Tortorella brings. But if he stays in the top 6, I think 60 points is realistic, somewhere in the range of 25 to 30 goals. Given Michkov's skill set, I wouldn't be surprised at all if that's how he ends up at the end of the day, but there are some hurdles in his way. Overall, I think that, Michkov brings so many different elements to the game at this stage, and he's shown so many different elements of this game in preseason that, I think his odds of staying in the top 6 are good. But what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think he'll be playing top 6 minutes this season for the vast majority of games that he dresses up for. There's just too much offensive talent with this player, and It's quite clear that Philadelphia is really, really invested in his development, top down in the entire organization. Like we even saw a clip coming out of Philly practice with John Tortorella giving Michkov instructions via the translation of Egor Zamula. And there's a lot of just like support going Michkov's way in this organization, and really trying to help him flourish offensively without necessarily trying to get a Selke candidate out of him. Like there's not this hyper fixation on trying to make him a two-way forward, because that just isn't his game. He's a poacher. He's an offensive creator. He's so intelligent in the offensive zone. There's so much that he can do that no one else in this Philadelphia lineup can do at his level already. And yeah, I'm very excited to see what this season has in store for Michkov. And I think he'll get Flyers fans out of their seats on a pretty regular basis during home games. But he isn't quite the front runner for this Calder Trophy this season, because a little player by the name of Macklin Celebrini still exists in this league, and he has gotten off to a flying start. In his first NHL game, he scored a goal, added an assist, both quite pretty in their own way. The goal was, I think the action itself was very nice. Perhaps the deflection it took off of the St. Louis Blues defender made it a little bit less, wasn't as big of a maybe highlight reel goal in the end, even though it was off of a spinorama. But the assist that he got on the Tyler Toffoli goal was also very pretty. He was so involved in San Jose's offense. He played 17 and a half minutes, got 2 shots on goal, and yeah, played a really, really great game. The asterisk being, of course, that he picked up an injury and is now on the IR, so he'll be missing at least the next week of games for San Jose. But once he's back, he's going to be right back in the top 6 for the Sharks. And this is a franchise caliber centerman that San Jose got on draft day, and there's going to be a whole lot more offensive creation than he's shown so far, and a lot more to look forward to there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Celebrini, with the injury he just picked up, we're not sure how long he's going to be out. There's not many details on it yet, but the expectation is for him to be back fairly soon and should be able to kind of resume training, resume play, all that stuff. I think this might knock 6, maybe at most 7 games out of his regular season, but we'll see how that goes. He's on IR, so minimum 7 days. But nothing really serious happened in that game that made people kind of worry about his overall health. It wasn't a major kind of knee contact or anything like that. So we'll see how that kind of develops and keep you updated on that. And by the way, while we were talking about this, quick little tidbit of news: a 2025 NHL draft eligible Luka Radovojevic just earned a move to the Muskegon Lumberjacks in the USHL, heading out from Slovakia. So great move there for Radovojevic. I think it's going to be really useful for his game. And I'm excited to see what he does with Muskegon. And you get another prospect to watch in your neck of the woods, right?
I need some more talent in my region this season, so I'm rather happy about this. And also adding another blue line prospect that's not for the NTDP in the USHL is very nice, because there isn't really very much out there apart from Radovojevic now.
For sure, he's pushing for a first round selection right now, Radovojevic. He's not there yet. There's some issues in size. He's about 5'10", and he doesn't really play that well physically, but he's a great breakout passer, really smart in transition. He's got some decent defensive chops too. There's something to work with here. It's just about figuring it out with that lower frame and getting used to harder pressure, harder physical play, that kind of stuff. He was playing, I believe he was playing over in Sweden, right? If I'm not wrong, he was playing in the J20. And that's always been my gripe with the J20. It's just so fundamentally different from North American hockey. You don't face, especially for defensemen, you're just not facing the level of pressure that you're going to face at higher levels. So I'm hoping to see that North American style be something he acclimates to quickly, because if he does, it's going to change his projection a decent amount and push him into the first round. But to get back into the Calder watch and Macklin Celebrini, just to close off this first segment, what's your prediction in terms of points for him on the season?
I mean, I'm going to be going off of an 82 game pace here. I would say that my expectation is going to be 70 points, but like plus minus 10 in terms of 82 game pace. I think that there's definitely a possibility he ends up as a point a game guy in his rookie season, which we haven't seen from an NHL rookie that's like under 20 in ages. But I don't think that would be a fair expectation either, despite him being a fantastic first overall pick. That said, I think no matter what the point totals are, what you're getting with Celebrini is an all-round player. So whether he scores 60 or he scores 80 or he scores 50, wherever he ends up this season, he'll be bring a really positive impact in just about every facet of the game. He's defensively responsible. He's physically engaged. He's a massive threat on the rush in terms of scoring and generating offense. He's fantastic on the cycle, is a big threat on the power play with a one-timer and great playmaking ability. And he's just going to improve San Jose in just about every single facet, which, I mean, God knows they needed that after last season. And the fact that like their tank year is not just only building up towards the future now with adding a first overall pick, but improving them right here, right now is certainly very exciting there in the Shark Tank.
Absolutely. And that wraps up our first segment. We'll get into our second, where we talk about the other candidates here: Logan Stankoven, Lane Hutson, a lot more. But just before, a quick word from a new sponsor we have at Hims. All right, guys, sometimes intimate moments can happen spontaneously, and you always want to be ready when those moments happen. So, Hims provides access to treatments that help you stay performing in the bedroom and help you last longer, giving you the boost of confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. You can get access to affordable sexual health treatments like chewable hard mints, Viagra, Cialis, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper than they go on the market. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits, and it doesn't take that much of your time. So start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. Again, that's hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if those treatments are appropriate. Restrictions apply. See your website for details and important safety information. Subscription is required, and price varies based on product and subscription plan. Alrighty, so let's move on to our other candidates here for the Calder Watch. We'll talk first and foremost about Logan Stankoven, who had an absolutely torrid start to the season in with the Dallas Stars. And for me, so far, as much as I love Michkov, as much as I love Macklin Celebrini, Logan Stankoven is a true frontrunner. It should not be ignored in this Calder race, right? I mean, there's been doubts his whole career. Yes, he's 5'8". Yes, he's an offensive winger who does a lot of his work through energy, through grit, through outworking opponents. And there's always doubts around those projections. You can look back at the likes of Brendan Gallagher, those kinds of guys, as examples of guys who were doubted in their draft year and quickly outperformed expectations. I think Logan Stankoven's on a similar path, but an even better path than the one that Gallagher started on in his career with the Montreal Canadiens, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, Logan Stankoven molded his game after Brendan Gallagher. Stankoven was a Habs fan growing up and really idolized how Gallagher approached the game. And I think the mentality is very, very similar with how Stankoven plays the game. But there's a lot more skill in Stankoven's arsenal. He's a lot more dynamic. He's a far better playmaker, far better puck handler, and a far better skater than Brendan Gallagher ever has been. And while Macklin Celebrini is off to a 2-point-a-game start, Stankoven's off to a 3-point-a-game start through just a single game with the Dallas Stars, where he picked up 3 assists in a 4-3 win over the Nashville Predators, and also a game where he only played 12 and a half minutes. Last season, Stankoven really arrived with a bang at the professional level, scoring 57 points in 47 AHL games before jumping to the NHL, where he scored 14 points in 24 regular season games and was also really impactful in the playoffs with 3 goals, 8 points in 19 games. This is a player that, as you mentioned, is certainly in the running for this Calder Trophy, and I do think that Celebrini is far and away the most likely player to win it. Stankoven is easily a top 3 or top 4 contender for this trophy. And it all comes down to how he approaches the game. He gives it his all every single shift. He's highly intelligent, highly skilled. He's so intentional with every single thing he does. He doesn't waste energy, doesn't waste time and space when he has the puck on his stick. And he's just so dogged in the offensive zone. Like, there are a few players league-wide that are quite as tenacious within 5 feet of the net as Logan Stankoven is. And I think he's going to score a lot of gritty and dirty goals this season as a result of that.
I also think the other part of that is just back checks, hard forechecks, details, playing inside
Absolutely.
structure, being tactically sound. That gives Stankoven, I think, the best odds of these three to stick in a top six, to cement himself as an option in the top end of the lineup, and hopefully rack up a ton of points. I mean, yes, he's undersized, but he does all the details that coaches love. He brings a level of energy that no one else can match on his team. And overall, it's just he's a detailed, composed, mature player. You can't ignore those when it comes to Calder runs. Yes, he's older, but that doesn't really take it into account that much when it comes to Calder races, unless
And
there's
he's
a
21. Like
yeah.
by Calder standards, that's well within the range of young enough.
Absolutely right. He is a 2021 NHL draftee, but we're talking about a prospect who is still 21, who's still a rookie. I know he played NHL last year, both in the regular season and the playoffs, but he is technically still a rookie and eligible for the Calder. So I really like his odds of getting this Calder Trophy. So if you're a betting man, I think I'm betting on Stankoven. As much as, again, I love Michkov, I love Celebrini. Stankoven's right there. But let's talk about Lane Hutson as well, because I don't see him getting enough love when it comes to the Calder Trophy. And he's a point a game so far as of recording this, through 2 matches this year and 2 matches last year. 4 assists in 4 games. He had to score his first NHL goal, but I'd be surprised if that doesn't come soon, given the skill level, the offensive involvement that we've regularly seen from Lane Hutson. The 5'10" left shot defenseman who was drafted at 5'8" at 62nd overall in the 2022 NHL draft, grew a couple inches, dominated the NCAA, hit the NHL running, has been playing on the second pair for Montreal so far with David Savard. What's your read on his odds overall, and what do you think his point totals will look like this season?
I think his odds are decent. I think that he's very clearly a top four in the running for this trophy. I mean, we're going to talk about some other players in the last segment, like Cutter Gauthier, for instance, who I also think is certainly a contender. But Lane Hutson, I really do believe is going to end up as Montreal's number one defenseman by year's end, if not earlier. In the first game this season against Toronto, he played 18 and a half minutes. And in the second game against Boston, on the back half of back-to-back, he played 22 minutes and 48 seconds. Mike Matheson is obviously getting triple shifted in many of those games and is playing like 26 plus minutes a night. But I really do see Lane Hutson as a player that is going to take over that first power play spot in that lineup. And if you're giving Lane Hutson that many minutes, he is going to shine offensively. In both games that he played this season against Toronto and Boston, among both teams on the ice, he was the player in both games that had the puck on his stick the longest. In both games, it was over 2 minutes of on puck time. He's also had like the third most end-to-end rushes in the league so far this season, only behind Dylan Cousins and I think Jack Hughes. He's just been very dynamic and constantly wants the puck on his stick, very creative. He's made some mistakes, certainly, but you have to make those mistakes in order to learn at the NHL level. And yeah, the offensive creation has been fantastic. And even the defensive impact this season's been strong. He's made some defensive errors, certainly, but he's been really, really effective at basically just having the puck only in the offensive zone when he's on the ice. So there just aren't very many scoring chances against. I believe so far at 5-on-5, when he's on the ice, Montreal's averaging like 2.2 XG against per 60 at 5-on-5, and when he's off the ice, it's like 4.4 or something absurd. So he's been very impactful and just tilting the ice in Montreal's favor and playing a really big role as a puck mover. And yeah, I think that this is a player that Montreal is going to be building around for a very long time and will cement himself as a first pairing player by the end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. What's been really interesting with Hutson, especially, is just the amount of times, and we've seen this pretty much at every level. The amount of times I'm thinking, okay, he's out of room. He's got three guys closing in on him. He's running out of space and time. Like, he's gonna have to get rid of the puck, and instead of getting rid of the puck, he pushes into a perfect spot. There was this play yesterday, this offensive zone play he made where he recovered a puck along the wall, spun down, then did a punch turn out of the corner, escaped pressure, then moved back to the blue line with three guys closing down on him. And usually in that scenario, you see a guy just backhand the puck out of trouble. But instead, what he did is he slipped a backhand pass between two Bruins right to Christian Dvorak in the bumper. which you don't often see. These are ideas and processing skills that he has that you don't really see with NHLers. I think the issue with him is going to be consistency, right? We
Yeah.
saw it with Quinn Hughes when he got into the league. He struggled to perform at a consistent level until maybe his third or fourth year in the league. At that point, he got really comfortable and became the Norris Trophy winner we know today. But it's a long road to that when it comes to undersized puck movers who love to have the puck on their stick, who love to make offensive plays. It takes a bit longer to figure out kind of how to do it properly, how to do it consistently while still maintaining defensive impact. Because Quinn Hughes' defensive impact is very good now. It wasn't very good when he started off. So I think patience is going to be a virtue with Lane Hutson. He might earn his way onto a top pair this season, but I think to cement himself as a top pair defenseman long term on a contending team, that might take a bit longer. It might take 3 to 4 years. But in terms of point totals, I think 35-40 is realistic when it comes to Hutson in his position, and he might work his way up from there. But I think, to medal expectations, I'd say 35-40 is my prediction. What's yours?
I'm optimistic. I've always been very optimistic when it comes to Lane Hutson. I mean, I ranked him 11th overall in his draft year. I've always loved this player. And I'm just going to keep being bullish on him. I think he scores more closer to 50 to 55 this season than 35 to 40. I think that he's going to be getting a lot of offensive zone starts and playing a lot of time. I think by midseason, he'll be on that first power play unit. And if you plug him on a power play unit with players of the caliber of Kirby Dach and Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield and Yuri Slavkovsky, you're going to rack up a lot of points. Even if just a couple of secondary assists here and there, it's going to definitely help inflate the point totals a little bit. And yeah, I think he's going to have a really fun rookie campaign. Do I think he's going to win the Calder this season? Not necessarily. I think there's a lot of competition this year, but I definitely think he will get a couple votes when that time comes. But that wraps things up here for our second segment. In the final segment, we'll be looking at 4 other players that are going to be in the running, including Cutter Gauthier and Will Smith. They're from the Pacific Division. But first, a quick word from our sponsors over at Hey NFL fans, you can start the season off with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. You can take your swings on whatever you want to as well, whether it be American football or European football. Maybe you're a big Champions League fan and have been watching all the Champions League match days so far this year, or maybe you prefer the Premier League, whatever floats your boat. But perhaps you're not a football fan in any capacity and prefer tennis or golf, or, I mean, if you're listening to this podcast, maybe hockey is your sport of choice. Whatever interests you the most, FanDuel has something up your alley. You'll get started with a $200 in free bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That is at FanDuel.com.
Alrighty, so let's move on to our final segment here. We'll talk about a couple more front runners for the Calder Trophy. We'll start off with we'll start off with Cutter Gauthier here of the Anaheim Ducks. A lot of controversy surrounding his ability to push his way to Anaheim out of Philly there. But I think it all worked out for the best for him specifically, and the Flyers got his replacement in Matvei Michkov pretty quickly. So they're working pretty well on their side as well. But yeah, for Anaheim, Cutter Gauthier is in a great position. He's on a very young team with the likes of Trevor Zegras and Leo Carlson, a bunch of other guys that are in there among the forward group. And Cutter Gauthier is another name in there, but I think he's one of the front runners to be playing a full-time top 6 role. Do you think that's realistic for him this season with Anaheim? Perhaps more on the second line, but still likely in the top 6?
I definitely think that at the second line is going to be more likely, especially because you have a player in a very similar profile that has just been pushing his way up the lineup for the last couple of seasons in Mason McTavish. I'd expect that you had those 2 players split on different lines to play at that similar kind of physical F1 role with a lot of soft skill to go along with that hard skill, and also just really, really nice finishing ability from in tight and also from the bumper position. So I think that the second line is really where Gauthier can find his niche this season. And I'd love to see him just play very consistent minutes with consistent line mates this season. He thrives when he has a keen understanding of who he's playing with. And I mean, hey, if you pair him with, for instance, Leo Carlsson and Trevor Zegras, just to put a couple names out there, I think that's a really, really nice group of players to build around, and to have also two separate offensive lines that can produce a lot of offense, but also bring some physicality and some defensive solidity as well. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to in Anaheim as well. I mean, they've been hoarding prospects and young players for a long time, and they're finally really making a big push and entering the big leagues. I mean, we saw how well Carlson and Michkov did last season, and now this season you have Cutter Gauthier coming in. You have another player that we'll talk about in a second here, in Olen Zellweger, entering the mix as well for the Ducks. So yeah, a real youth revolution happening there in Anaheim.
Absolutely, and let's take a moment to speak about Olen Zellweger. He's a prospect we both really liked in his draft year, which is also 2021. It was the same as Logan Stankoven, and a couple more guys on this list here. But to focus on Zellweger, I mean, he's a fantastic puck mover. He's a daring offensive defenseman, but he's also refined his defensive skill. He's gotten better at kind of surfing on opponents, kind of pushing them to the outside in transition, but also his in-zone plays improved. And for a relatively undersized player, I don't remember if he's 5'11" or 6 foot, somewhere in that range.
He's officially 5'9", 183.
Oh, goodness. Okay, much smaller than I thought he was.
But yeah, elite skater.
An elite skater, and that's really the standout tool with him, right? I mean, he can just push the pace incredibly quickly on both sides, right? Whether he's skating forward, backwards, moving laterally, moving up the ice, moving down the ice, it doesn't matter. He skates really, really, really well, and that compensates for his lack of pure size. I think the thing with Zellweger is just continuing to improve his ability to overcome his lack of size with really decent physical tools. I don't think he's a decent board battler yet. I don't think he's a guy who can fend off pressure along the boards or in front of the net consistently enough in order to be an effective down low defenseman. And maybe that doesn't come with time. But regardless, I think he's in a great spot in Anaheim. He's got Pavel Michkov to lean on for those kind of responsibilities, and other guys coming up the pipeline. Tristan Duneau, those kinds of guys long term. Noah Warren, Tyson Hines. The list is long in terms of defensemen in Anaheim. Stian Solberg as well. So they've got a decent batch of guys that complement Michkov and Zellweger fairly well. So I'm excited to see how that develops. Then we have another San Jose Shark, Will Smith, who's joined the group this year. I have lower expectations for Smith than I do for Celebrini, even though Will Smith by far outproduced him in the NCAA. I still think that with Smith, you've got a prospect who has a bit more to learn in order to be an effective NHL center than Celebrini already has, right? Like Celebrini, by the end of the year was very clear this guy was ready for top 6 minutes in the NHL. I don't think Will Smith is ready for top 6 minutes in the NHL yet, and if he is in that position, it's by default, not by deservedness, right? He's
the first game this season has shown that. I mean, Celebrini played 17.5 minutes, and Smith played 13.5 minutes. So even like early on this season, that utilization has been a bit tiered.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what's interesting with Smith is that I think that discrepancy will continue. He's a great playmaker. He's got a really good shot as well. Solid hands overall. The puck skills across the board are really strong. He's a good skater, but he still doesn't have the NHL center habits down pat yet, and that should come with time and with maturity, and just with experience overall at the NHL level. But I think that this year Smith is really on the outside looking in this Calder race. But let's close things off here with a goalie. Dustin Wolf is going to be pretty much a full-time starter this season for the Calgary Flames, for the quote-unquote rebuilding Calgary Flames. What's your take on his position in this Calder race, and will the fact that he plays on a true rebuilding team right now affect his totals and consequently his odds of winning the Calder?
Yeah, I definitely think that he's a real dark horse among the candidates that we're presenting here today. Like him and Zellweger are probably the two that have been least talked about in the Calder race among the 8 players that we're mentioning here. But I think that the impact of him playing on a weaker team this season is twofold. On the one hand, as you mentioned, the results aren't going to be quite the same as if he were playing, I don't know, on like an elite contender, for instance. but he's going to be playing a lot more games as a result. He's playing the crease with Dan Vladash, and I think that he will very much dominate the crease by the end of the season. I mean, last year he already got into 17 games with Calgary. He put up an 893. He struggled a little bit in the crease there, but in the AHL with the Calgary Wranglers, he's just been dominant now for 3 seasons in a row. Like in the AHL, he's put up a 924, a 932, and a 922 in back-to-back seasons, playing 47, 55, and 36 games. And this is still just a 23-year-old goaltender, which by goaltending development curves is still extremely young. So I'm curious to see how he does this season, but he's so intelligent, so composed. Despite being undersized at 6 feet and 174 pounds, he really commands the crease whenever he's starting in net. So I'd love to see him really push himself into the real Calder race here, because it'll make things a lot more interesting. And I mean, Calgary needs something to cheer for this year. So I'd love to see it, but he's definitely, I think, a less likely candidate for the reasons that you mentioned as well, compared to guys like Celebrini and Stankoven, for instance.
For sure. And that wraps things up for today's show. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments if we missed anybody. If you want us to talk about anyone else that's in the NHL and pushing for the Calder, let us know. I know Jackson Blake's starting in the with the Canes, but he's on the 4th line. He's kind of on the outside looking in. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rating review and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports. And make sure to tune in for our future shows as we continue our prospect coverage for the month of October. This has been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian High, and we hope you tune in next time.